Ghosts of Tottori, Chapter 4, Haizu. Kotashi's reputation had grown increasingly over time, but after the story of the Gashodokaru spread, a new, mystical reverence came to be associated with his name. Village by village, we were treated less as performers of an ancient rite, and more as kami, deities somehow imbued with divinity. This did not please Kotashi, nor Haru, or me. For the first time, Kotashi did not accept invitations. Villages now wanted only to boast that he had visited them, his mere presence somehow blessing enough to protect them against future misfortune. As we traveled, we sought the most secluded areas to rest in, away from villages, and waited for requests that were genuine. Kotashi began to speak of traveling towards Sendai once again, or possibly as far as Sapporo, and our path had already turned in that direction on the morning that a messenger found us. He came to us from a village next to the sea, Haizu, where a man had been murdered and his deeply troubled spirit roamed. The messenger warned us that the murderer had not been discovered, and the villagers took refuge in their homes before the sun was fully down. Kotashi accepted the messenger's plea to perform the ceremony and guide the spirit toward the realm and peace that awaited it, our path turning again, this time toward the sea. Mist enveloped the village of Haizu with the tenacity of damp silk, the air redolent of brine and seaweed from the Sea of Japan, which churned beyond a veil of fog. A chill breeze whispered through the narrow streets, carrying with it the somber mood that had befallen the coastal hamlet. That day had been racked by storms, nature's tumultuous symphony still resonating in the occasional gust of wind that whipped through my hair and tugged at my kimono. Our procession was nearly silent as we made our way to the center of the village. The messenger took the last moments before we met the village elders to explain that the spirit, like many before him, had once been a man of the sea. His life had been cut short, yes, but his existence ended in the sanctity of his own bed, which we had not been told before. His body had been found pierced and mutilated, a macabre tableau that spoke of an anger and hatred. The villagers we passed did not speak, but hollow eyes betrayed their inner turmoil. They moved as if through water, each action slowed by an unseen burden. As I walked past homes where families huddled together, I could almost feel the spectral gaze of the slain fishermen, searching for something amidst the living. I knew that a true challenge lay before us, for there is a delicate art to appeasing those who have been wronged so grievously. The crash of waves lent a tone of urgency to the evening as we sat in the presence of Haizu's elders. We gathered in a circle, the floor beneath us adorned with tatami mats that whispered under our weight. Incense burned at the altar, its smoke curling upwards until frequent gusts of wind disrupted the tendrils. In the heart of the assembly, amidst respectful silence, lay an array of personal effects belonging to the deceased, a testament to a life so brutally severed. His fishing tools were meticulously arranged, a symbol of his trade and his contribution to the village. The gear was worn yet well cared for, indicating a man who took pride in his work. A set of wooden combs, likely used by him during festival days, spoke of a connection to tradition, a life entwined with the ebb and flow of the seasons and the community's rituals. The young fisherman's absence was palpable, his untimely departure leaving a void that resonated through the chamber and into the hearts of those present. It was conveyed through the careful placement of his belongings, each item a chapter of his story left unfinished. He had been a solitary figure in life, not yet bound to another through marriage or children, but deeply rooted in the familial bonds, and they grieved him. His parents, we were told, had raised him with affection, instilling in him the virtues of humility and diligence. His siblings, companions in both play and toil, had found their own lives ripped apart by loss. The shock of discovering him violated by an assailant's blade, the dark ink of blood a stark contrast against his white futon, sent ripples of despair through the village. A shroud of uncertainty enveloped all, for the murderer remained undiscovered. This unknown malevolence cast a sinister pall over the village, its opacity thwarting any attempt to understand or anticipate its motives. The dread was not simply born of the violence inflicted upon one of their own, but also the harrowing possibility that the perpetrator moved among them, unseen, an ever-present threat cloaked in a familiar guise. The elders had confided their hopes that Katashi, with his deep connection to the spiritual plane, might discern the culprit while ushering the slain fisherman's spirit into tranquil repose. Fear had taken a grip over the streets of Haizu. Doors were bolted tight. Fishermen glanced uneasily at the horizon, and mothers clutched their children closer. The unknown, the unseen, the unresolved, all coalesced in a silent specter that loomed over us, as tangible as the mist rolling in from the sea, and both the spirit and the town needed to be guided toward rest. I absorbed the essence of our task ahead. We were no longer to only guide a departed spirit. We were also searching for a truth that needed to be unearthed, for the peace of the village and the innocent soul taken from it so violently. The ceremony would be our conduit, a passage through which clarity might emerge from the depths of confusion and chaos. Katashi said nothing, but his expression was unmistakable. Such a revelation would not come tonight, as the storm had infused the atmosphere with dissonance, scattering the subtle energies that spirits communicated with. As the elders' voices hushed to a whisper, their tale of the young fisherman's life and untimely death hanging heavy in the air, Katashi remained silent. With a stillness that belied the undercurrent of his thoughts, he sat among us, an anchor in the tumultuous sea of emotions swarming within the room. His gaze, usually so clear and focused, now seemed to drift into the unseen, as if piecing together the fragmented whispers of the village's loss with the quietude of a sage. It was not until the last elder's sigh had dissipated into the cool evening that Katashi finally rose. The lines on his face, normally smooth and composed, betrayed of subtle tension as he addressed the room. The ceremony, he declared with measured certainty, must wait until tomorrow night. There was no explanation offered, no elaboration. His words carried the weight of finality, and within them an unspoken understanding that time, a commodity so often taken for granted, was now a precious ally in our midst. Haru and I exchanged a glance, our own trepidations mirrored in each other's eyes. We knew Katashi to be unyielding in his adherence to the rites of passage, his respect for tradition etched deep within him like the ancient scripts upon a temple bell. Yet the unease that clung to him now was unfamiliar, a shadow cast across his otherwise impeccable resolve. Haru's brows furrowed slightly, a slight acknowledgment of the invisible threads of disquiet that wound around us both. The moment lingered, fraught with unspoken questions, before it quietly folded into the fabric of time. In the surrounding hush, the village seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the next act in a drama that had been set in motion by forces both seen and unseen. We retired from the company of the elders as dusk gathered, painting the village of Haizu in hues of somber gray. The sea of Japan whispered secrets as Katashi moved toward the door, his silhouette framed against the waning light, a lone figure preparing to confront the vastness that lay beyond. He took a moment to view the scrolls on display in the temple and chose one, tucking it inside his robe. With a solemn voice, he then conveyed his need for solitude, and though Haru and I stood ready to accompany him, to blend our steps with his along the coastal path, he requested otherwise. "I will go alone," he said, and it was not a suggestion, but a decree, which no one could dispute. As he stepped out, the cool mist enveloped his hooded frame, and he became one with the wind's embrace, a spectre venturing into the realm between wakefulness and dreams. His departure left behind an echo of unease, a subtle disturbance in the air like the flutter of wings from a bird taking flight in haste. Harrow's gaze followed Katashi until the mist swallowed him whole, the sea's briny breath blurring the boundary between the village and the vast unknown. With the echo of Katashi's footfalls fading, Harrow turned to me, fatigue etched in the lines of his face, suggesting surrender to the day's burdens. We retreated to the sanctuary of our allotted rooms with the humble guest house that perched on the outskirts of Haizu. Harrow yielded to his weariness, his door closing with the intent of one seeking respite in dreams. Alone now, I performed the nightly rituals that tethered me to tradition, the careful folding of the garments, the precise alignment of footwear at the threshold. Yet these actions felt hollow, the precision of each movement failing to ward off the pervasive disquiet. Wary of travel myself, I settled upon the futon, but the uneven lapping of the waves against the shore made for restless tossing and turning. The night, ever a blanket of possibilities, draped over Haizu with an ominous touch. The stillness of midnight was shattered by a cacophony of voices, their urgency piercing the veil of sleep that had only just claimed me. Startled from the shallow grasp of slumber, I found myself abruptly upright. My heartbeat thrummed in sync with the frantic shouting that pierced the stillness, a tumult that seemed to rise from the very heart of the village, urgent and foreboding. The muted glow of my room was usurped by the erratic dance of lanterns outside that filtered through the paper screens, casting long, quivering shadows that spoke of turmoil beyond the walls. With the practiced grace of one accustomed to rituals of response, I slid from the futon, feet finding the cool, woven straw of the tatami with silent precision. There was no time for the usual meticulous habits that bookended each day. Urgency stripped away the layers of ceremony and left only instinct. I moved towards the entryway, where my clothing lay folded, and dressed swiftly. Harrow's door slid open with an audible rush, his presence emerging into the dim corridor like a figure stepping out of a painting. Stark against the backdrop of minimalist architecture, his posture, typically relaxed after a day's work, was now taut with anticipation, every line of his body attuned to the discord outside. We exchanged no words, there was no need. The situation unfolded before us, demanding immediate attention, our roles clear even in the absence of dialogue. Together we stepped down into the village night, a tableau vivant of disarray greeting us. The bobbing lanterns wove a narrative of distress as they traveled in erratic paths, held aloft by many hands. It was a procession not unlike those observed in festivals, yet here the choreography was born of fear, not celebration. Each flickering became a beacon of uncertainty, illuminating faces etched with anxiety and eyes wide with unspoken questions. Villagers moving with deliberate haste, their silhouettes fragmented by intermittent glow. Harrow and I fell into step with the collective movement, drawn toward the epicenter of disturbance, our own emotions carefully contained behind a facade of composed readiness. The scene before us served as a reminder that beneath the veneer of order and ritual lay a current of unpredictability, one that could surface and disrupt the meticulous patterns of life with little warning. The procession ended in a gathering crowd. Harrow and I moved through the swarm, villages whose faces were etched with panic. The lanterns they held aloft cast shadows that danced with macabre glee. In their midst, a grim scene took form, a huddle of figures cradling a body between them with an urgency that belied the solemnity of their task. They had found Katashi, his flesh telling tales of violence in the language of visceral wounds, a canvas of cuts, each a brutal brushstroke marred his skin, mirroring the fate of the young fisherman who had been plucked from life's loom too soon, his threads severed without ceremony. The villagers carried Katashi now, many arms interlacing beneath him as they navigated the uneven ground, moving as if they bore not just the weight of a man, but the very essence of tradition itself. It was a morbid parade, a testament to the fragility of human existence and the rites we performed to try to make sense of that which eludes comprehension. We moved swiftly beside them as they transported Katashi into the village's largest hall, a space often used for gatherings of import and rituals steeped in the gravity of ancestral wisdom. Here, on ordinary days, birth would be celebrated, unions would be blessed, and harvests would be honored. Tonight, it served a grimmer purpose. Healers awaited within, their tools arrayed as extensions of their intent to heal. Their movements were deliberate, the choreography of their ministrations honed by years of tending to those marred by the sea. With hands, guided by knowledge passed down through generations, they worked to stitch the veil between life and death, endeavoring to keep Katashi tethered to the realm of the breathing. As Haru and I stood witness to this solemn intervention, the air seemed to grow colder, the mist thicker, nature itself pausing to acknowledge the gravity of the moment. The sea continued to whisper its timeless refrain against the shore, indifferent to the mortal struggle unfolding, yet providing a rhythmic backdrop to our fervent efforts. The healers' hands danced their ballet over Katashi's battered form, while outside the lanterns flickered like stars struggling to shine through the shroud of uncertainty. This was not the meticulous art of ceremonial practice I had so diligently honed. This was raw, unscripted humanity laid bare. A stark reminder that despite our best efforts to clothe our existence in layers of order and meaning, we are ultimately at the mercy of forces beyond our control. I watched, heart heavy with the knowledge that the world does not always conform to the elegant symmetry of ceremony. Sometimes it is the dissonant notes, the unexpected silences between rituals that define our experiences. Pain etched into Katashi's features like calligraphy on aged parchment. He motioned with a trembling hand, dismissing the flurry of healers that surrounded him. The healers withdrew with bowed heads, leaving an unsettled stillness in their wake. Haru and I approached our leader with no thought to shield the concern that etched our own features. We stood as twin pillars on either side of Katashi, embodying the strength and support he had always provided us. His chest rose and fell with labored breaths, each one a testament to the life force that refused to be extinguished. In this moment, the veil between worlds seemed too thin, little more than gossamer, frail and translucent. His voice, when it came, was a mere whisper. Betrayal, he revealed, had woven itself into the fabric of our purpose here. The villagers, those we came to aid, harbored knowledge stained by silence. They knew the identity of the murderer, the darkness that had descended upon their home. With each shallow breath, Katashi painted the picture of a menace that had upended the village's tranquility. It was a yokai, he whispered, a spectral entity known as Kushika Onna, whose malevolence was as deep as the ocean that bordered Haizu. The revelation settled upon my shoulders with a chill, transformative in its implications. Our role, once clear as the path of stars across the night sky, now felt obscured by a mist of uncertainty. In the quiet that followed Katashi's confession, the reality of our situation unfolded like ink descending into water, a stark contrast against the purity of our intentions. In the solemnity of that room, reality merged with the ephemeral. The village continued its deception, unaware of the tremors that had shaken the foundation of our beliefs. Time held its breath as we processed the gravity of Katashi's words. A powerful yokai walked among us, cloaked in deceit, and we were left to navigate the murky waters it had stirred. The knowledge that the villagers had harbored the truth behind masks of earnestness, much like a festering wound concealed beneath fine silk, cast a shadow over our spirits. Kuchisaki Onna had woven her malevolence through the fabric of their daily lives. Even when unseen, she was ever present. Her acts of violence were not random caprice, but precise incisions into the tranquility of this coastal enclave. As we stood there, I could not help but feel the meticulous nature of our craft, the intricate patterns of ceremony and tradition that promised order in a world of chaos, was unraveling amidst Katashi's whispers, and the stark reality of treachery, the ceremonial bonds we wove, dissolved, revealing the raw visage of human vulnerability. Katashi's revelation required no response. It was a disappointment meant to be met by silent acknowledgement. In this space where mortality and eternity brushed against each other, we were but transient witnesses to the enduring cycle of life, death, and the restless spirits caught between. He inhaled as deeply as he could, summoning all of his strength to describe the events that had befallen him. When he left the elders, he suspected the presence of something more than just the spirit of the fisherman. Clouds from the storm hung heavy in the sky, masking any light from the moon or the stars. As he walked alone, the path along the sea became a corridor between two worlds. It was there that the yokai had approached him, materializing from the mist as if conjured by the very essence of the ocean itself. She wore beauty like an armor, her presence commanding yet enigmatic, a stark contrast to the ragged turmoil of the churning sea behind her. In the cool, briny air she stood, a figure of poise and haunting grace, her form shifting through the encroaching fog. The woman moved close to Katashi, smiling, and asked in a soft voice, "Watashi, Kiri?" Did he think she was beautiful? Her question, simple yet loaded with peril, hung between them, a test of wits and will. Even in the throes of pain, Katashi's gaze never shifted, nor did his voice falter with the memory of that pivotal moment. He recognized the entity before him, her visage designed to captivate and ensnare. Ever the guardian of knowledge, both ancient and obscure, Katashi knew the truth behind the guise. His years of study had introduced him to tales of spirits that wandered, bound to the earth by threads of malice and sorrow. Yet the yokai posed her question, a test of vanity and consequence. He offered his affirmation. Yes, she was beautiful, a truth spoken with the caution of one who treads a path laced with peril. The sea murmured its timeless song, indifferent to the beings that danced upon its edge. Katashi found himself in a situation, and he realized he could not simply avoid. The enigma before him, cloaked in the guise of beauty, shifted with grace that belied the horror it concealed. With the smile of an ageless temptress, she parted her lips. The veil of allure fell away to reveal a grotesque maw, a wound carved from one ear to the other. The sight of her gaping mouth, a canvas of exposed teeth, an unfurled tongue, and the rawness of her throat was a testament to the brutality etched into her very essence. Her laughter then cascaded across the void like the crackling of frost, and she posed a new question. "Koridimo?" Did he still find her beautiful? Was a query repeated, not for want of an answer, but as a ritual of torment, a game played on the precipice of life and death. The mockery in her tone was clear, yet there was an undercurrent of longing that must have resided within. Katashi described to us what he observed, as one might study a painting, in the intricate details of her disfigurement. There was an unsettling artistry to it, a symmetry that compelled both revulsion and fascination in equal measure. It was as though she were a walking embodiment of a ceremonial mask, where each line told a story of pain and rage sculpted by an unseen hand. Amidst the backdrop of the churning sea, the scene unfolded, the audience of orchestra of crashing waves and the whispers of spirits caught between realms, bearing witness to a tragedy about to unfold. As the yokai awaited upon his answer, Katashi understood that this was a provocation from beyond the veil, a reminder that beauty in its most profound and terrifying form could be as much a curse as it was a blessing. In his mind, the tales of old spun like a weaver's shuttle through threads of thought. The story of Kushisaki Onna was one etched into the collective memory of our people, a fable turned all too real. Katashi sought to wield tradition as both shield and sword. he crafted his reply, a tapestry of half-truths designed to lead astray the malevolence that sought his affirmation. The ceremony of evasion, a practiced art in the face of such entities, unfolded as each deliberate syllable. There was a certain grace in this deception, akin to the measured movements of a tea-master performing their art. Yet within the realm of spirits, such rituals bore consequences far graver than those found in the tranquility of a tea-room. A sudden gust tore across the shoreline, a howl of nature's fury that swept away the warmth of the lantern's flame in an instant. Darkness enveloped the scene, and instead of a well-crafted answer, "No" escaped his throat, an involuntary incantation, a break in the spell he had intended to weave with his words. Kushisaki Ona's scream pierced the night, a sound that seemed to come from the depths of an anguished well. It was primal fury given voice, and as it reached Katashi's ears, he felt the temperature drop, the mist around him growing thicker. Clinging to his skin with cold fingers of dread, her face contorted with rage as she revealed her long, gleaming knife. With a movement as swift as it was silent, the weapon found its home in Katashi's flesh. There is a moment in certain ceremonies when the air itself seems to pause, awaiting the next step with bated breath. This was such a moment, albeit one steeped in violence rather than the poised stillness of ritual. The knife withdrew only to descend again and again, each thrust a punctuated verse in a litany of agony. Yet even as his body began to fail, Katashi clung to the discipline instilled by years of ceremonial practice. In the spaces between her strikes, his hand reached into the folds of his robe, fingers grasping for the parchment that bore the weight of tradition and power, the contract of Ito. Unfurling the scroll required ignoring the tremors that racked his frame. The paper crackled softly, a stark contrast to the wet sounds of the blade rending flesh. He presented it to the yokai, the characters upon it stark against the pale backdrop, imbued with the authority of ancient agreements and spiritual law. In these moments, there exists no room for fear or hesitation. Only the clarity of purpose remains. Like the finest brushstroke, the act must be flawless, free of tremor or uncertainty. The scroll was extended towards Kushisaki Onna in such a way. The cessation of the blade came as a sudden stillness in the night, the only sound now the hiss of the sea retreating from the pebbled shore. Katashi collapsed and lay there, breath ragged. Kushisaki Onna's silhouette wavered in the mist, her form obscured as if the fog itself sought to veil her gruesome satisfaction. And then she was gone. Katashi whispered that it was impossible to discern whether it had been the symbol of ancient rites inscribed upon the parchment or the yokai's own capricious whims that stayed her hand. Perhaps she had grown wary of the macabre dance, or maybe the contract had invoked a memory of boundaries established by forces greater than herself. In such ethereal encounters, one's understanding is often mired in ambiguity, the motives of spirits cloaked in enigma, as dense as the coastal fogs. Yet the cessation of violence granted Katashi reprieve enough to resist the pull toward the abyss. It was in this fragile state that the Providence saw fit to guide the footsteps of Katashi's inadvertent saviors. A group of travelers, bound together by shared knowledge of the lurking danger, emerged from the room. They approached their presence as unexpected benediction in the wake of terror. As they drew near, they quickly recognized his face and sent the fastest among them to the village for help, as the others did what they could to comfort this badly injured man. As Haro and I listened, the room seemed to contract, the air growing dense in the weight of revelation. In that moment, I understood that the rites we performed were more than just ceremonial gestures. They were anchors, holding fast against the currents that sought to unravel the tapestry of our existence. We were bound by duty, honor, and tradition, but in the reflection of Katashi's experience, it became clear that those bonds also tethered us to a world far beyond our understanding, one that required not only respect, but also the courage to face the unknown. In the dimly lit expanse of the large hall, Harrow's silhouette quivered with the incandescent fury that illuminated his otherwise stoic disposition. His frame, usually so composed in the face of ritual and ceremony, now trembled like a leaf caught in an autumn gust, a physical manifestation of the wrath that threatened to consume him from within. I stood beside him, my heart drumming a rhythm of indignation against my ribs. It was rare for this occurrence the emotion to grip me with such tenacity, but the tale of deceit and betrayal that had been spun before us ignited a flame that no measure of discipline could easily extinguish. Anger seeped through my meticulously crafted facade of calm, disrupting the equilibrium I had honed over countless ceremonies and quiet moments of reflection. And there, in the center of this storm of emotions, lay Katashi. His breaths were shallow, each one a laborious effort, yet his eyes held a depth of serenity that seemed incongruous with the chaos that enveloped us. Despite the grievous wounds marring his body, his presence still commanded the room with an authority that transcended the physical realm. He spoke then, not with words, but with the subtle shift of energy that often accompanied our most sacred rituals. His essence reached out, gently wrapping around the tumultuous spirits of Haru and myself, urging us back towards a state of harmony. The message was clear. Even without utterance, deception was as much a part of life as the changing tides or the phases of the moon, inescapable, unpredictable, and at times unfathomably cruel. With the same measured pace that guided my hands in the preparation of ceremonial offerings, I felt the anger begin to recede, replaced by a sense of purpose. Katashi's silent counsel resonated deep within, reminding us that to succumb to rage would be to surrender the very dignity we sought to uphold through our practices. He implored us to rise above the base instinct for retribution and instead embody the poise and grace that we extolled in every meticulously arranged kimono, every polished gesture, and every word spoken with careful deliberation. The hall, once heavy with the weight of unspeakable truths and rawness of exposed emotions, gradually returned to a state of equilibrium. The flickering lantern light cast soft shadows on the walls, painting a picture of tranquility that belied the undercurrents of turmoil. The hours of the night passed slowly. Katashi's shallow breaths were a counterpoint to the now steady rhythm of the waves. I stood at his bedside, my hands folded neatly in front of me, my eyes tracing the lines of pain etched into his once serene face. Haru and I maintained our vigil. We performed sacred rituals, allowing their familiarity to bring comfort where words could not. My movements were deliberate, each gesture an offering of respect. I poured water, symbolizing purity, over Katashi's hands, and placed a sprig of sakaki by his pillow, a token of the divine presence watching over him. Haru's presence was a steadfast companion in this somber task. Together we chanted the sutras, our voices low and harmonious, weaving through the stillness of the room. The verses spoke of impermanence and the transient nature of all things, reminding us that even as we grieved, we were part of a cycle much larger than ourselves. As dawn approached, the candles that burned bright throughout the night began to wane. It was in these early hours, as the first light of morning glowed through the rice paper windows, that Katashi's breathing slowed, then stopped. His spirit had slipped away, leaving behind the shell that had once housed a man of great wisdom and strength. A profound silence followed like a final blessing, granted by one who had walked the path of enlightenment. In the absence of his physical form, I sensed Katashi's essence expand, becoming one with the air, the ground, and the sea that murmured an endless lullaby just beyond the village. We had honored him as he had lived, with dignity and reverence for tradition, as though his passing left an emptiness that seemed vast as the ocean itself. I knew that the lessons he imparted would linger, guiding us as surely as the stars guide the mariners at sea. The scent of the ocean mingled with the lingering fragrance of incense as Haru and I emerged from the house where Katashi's body lay. Grief hung heavily upon us, a tangible shroud that seemed impervious to the gentle touch of the morning breeze. Haru's shoulders shook with silent sobs. his face etched with a sorrow so profound it was as if he had lost a part of his own soul. I stood by him, my heart aching with a pain mirrored in his posture, a testament to the bond we shared with our departed guide. We made our way to a small courtyard where found a measure of solitude amidst the chaos that enveloped Haizu. We sat on a wooden bench, worn smooth by the passage of countless seasons. Before us the simple comfort of steaming tea. The steam rose in quiet spirals, carrying with it a delicate aroma. It was a blend that unfolded slowly on the palate, much like the layers of understanding Katashi had revealed to us over the years. Haru and I drank in silence, punctuated by the distant cries of gulls and the persistent murmur of the sea. It was in this moment, surrounded by the enduring strength of the sea, that we reached an unspoken agreement. To honor Katashi was to embrace the path he had carved with such care and dedication. A path led not away from adversity, but directly into its heart. The decision to follow that road was forged in the glow of the rising sun, its rays casting elongated shadows across the courtyard. We would once more walk upon the path he had shown to us, stepping boldly into the role of guides from the spirit, still in the need of direction. It was a commitment that extended beyond mere duty. It was an homage to a man whose life had been a beacon of wisdom and compassion. Only after the young fisherman's spirit had found peace would we be able to honor Katashi with proper ceremony. With the conclusion of our tea, the vessels were cleaned and returned to their rightful places with reverent hands. We rose from the bench, our resolve cemented by the shared understanding that there could be no turning back. Ahead lay a journey fraught with grief and uncertainty, but it was one we would undertake with the same calm authority that had characterized Katashi's every action. Though heavy-hearted, we were not without direction, for in the wake of tragedy we had found purpose, and with it the courage to step forward. The somber gathering of the village elders stood before us, their faces etched with the burden of the untold truths. A tension rippled through them, the acknowledgement of the gravity of their offense and of our present circumstances. It was there, in hushed voices that hung heavy in the air, that they imparted the harrowing revelation. Their knowledge of Kushisaki's owner's involvement in the young fisherman's demise, and their hope that Katashi would discern the spectral enigma and contrive a means to vanquish the malevolent yokai, much as he had done with the Gashidokaru. Their intentions, misguided by desperation, now lay bare for all to see. Without knowing that Katashi would choose to take that fateful nocturnal sojourn, they had damned us all to suffer the death of their would-be savior and our leader. I made clear to them that Haru and I would honor the slain fisherman's spirit and the path of Katashi by performing the ghost paneling ceremony that very night. Katashi's scroll of the contract of Edo would be hung at the door of the fisherman's home to drive away any yokai should they seek to disturb us. The elders bowed in gratitude of our offer, and it was time to prepare, as we were now only 2 instead of 3. But Haru and I were not finished with the elders. Haru stepped forward and spoke with a voice cold as stone. He ordered that tomorrow night we would gather in the shrine and perform the ceremony of honor for Katashi. Haru's voice dropped lower as he spoke. Whomsoever did not attend this ceremony would be forever looked upon in shame by the ancestors, as a grievous mistake had been committed and it must be atoned for. Haru left the gathering, and I followed without another word. We spent the day building the panels for tonight's ceremony, and in the waning light of the afternoon, Haru and I finished our preparations. While we had done our work inside the village square, usually a place of communal gathering and vibrant discourse, it was transformed into a tableau of mourning, its atmosphere thick with the weight of collective sorrow. It would not be correct to say that Haru and I were pleased, but it was good to see that the village had accepted the responsibility of honor. As the sun dipped below the horizon, its final rays caressing the tempestuous sea, Haru and I donned the ceremonial garb. The fabric whispered against the skin the patterns and hues of testament to the gravity of our undertaking. With measured movements, we lit the incense, its aromatic tendrils ascending skyward, an olfactory bridge between worlds. The ceremonial tools were arrayed with meticulous care. their placement in accordance with ancient customs passed down to us by Katashi. A small altar was erected upon which offerings of incense, salt, and rice were laid, a trinity of elements to purify, protect, and nourish the spirit embarking on its final voyage. Amidst the gathered assembly of villagers, a palpable sense of unity took hold. For in this moment of shared grief and reflection, we were all acutely aware of the delicate thread that wove together life and death, love and loss, the seen and the unseen. It was a time-honored dance, and we, the humble participants, entrusted with leading the departed to the threshold of eternity. We commenced the rites, invoking protection and guidance for the young fisherman's soul. Each chant, each gesture was imbued with the profound respect and dignity that such a passage deserved. Haro began his song as I began the story of a young man whose life had been so viciously taken, the language of the ceremony resonating within the hearts of all who bore witness. Lanterns flickered like constellations grounded to the earth, and the incense that had risen in a straight path moments ago was now displaced. The spirit had arrived, and with it a wailing that I had never heard before. It did not ache with the resonance of sorrow, but rather the shrill urgency of a warning. I allowed my senses to spread into realms both seen and unseen, and it was then that I understood. My voice was clear and steady as I told the story of the soul that had been ripped from this mortal plane, only to return to warn the others in the village. The young fisherman was as selfless in death as he had been in life, and it was his desire to let his friends and loved ones know about the danger that stalked them through the darkness. My words turned to gratitude as I acknowledged the warning, to let the spirit know that he had succeeded, and now it was time to go to his ancestors that waited to welcome him in the next realm. The world around us receded, leaving only the focus of our intent, to shepherd the fisherman's spirit safely, ensuring that his journey would not be marred by the shadows that had claimed his mortal self. In the stillness that followed, a deep peace settled over the room, a gentle reminder that even in the darkest of times, the continuity of life's cycles remained unbroken. Haro's gentle song faded into its last note, and the fisherman's spirit had gone on to his ancestors. This ceremony had carried the young fisherman's spirit safely to the realm beyond, an act that brought solace to the community. The lanterns his family had set adrift on the inky waters returned with the morning tide, their flames extinguished, but their purpose fulfilled. Observations of grief were etched into Haro's face, a mirror to my own heartache. Yet beneath the sorrow, there was a steel thread of determination. We would not allow the abruptness of Katashi's death to bewilder us into unbalance. Resolve is what we called for, and it was a lesson taught to both myself and Haro by a true master. In the quietude of my heart, I prepared to face the bittersweet task at hand, immersing myself fully into the duty of remembrance. Tonight the village would unite in sorrow and respect, our spirits woven together in tribute to a soul ripped from this life too soon. The echo of last night's success bolstered my resolve. Katashi would be honored, and through our actions his memory would endure and his spirit would find rest. As the sun's warmth caressed the village, a collective unity seemed to move through the streets, a quiet homage to our leader, as if the calm sea itself urged us to honor Katashi, guiding the village as we prepared for the evening ceremony. The shrine grounds, familiar in their simplicity, had transformed into a tableau of reverence and beauty. Lanterns swayed gently, soon to be a constellation of amber lights that promised to guide Katashi's path on his next journey. I moved with deliberate care, ensnaring that of the placement of every Ifuda honored the traditions passed down through the generations. Old talismans mingled with the new, each one inscribed with blessings and prayers. Their presence filled the spaces between, creating a tapestry of hope and remembrance that blanketed the very air we breathed. Panels of cloth adorned the kana and the kami, caught the light, their intricate patterns seeming to dance in the breeze. I hung them with precision, feeling the weight of each brushstroke that detailed their sacred text. The fabric whispered stories of protection and love, enshrining Katashi's legacy within the woven threads. This ceremony promised to be more elaborate than any I had ever witnessed. It was my duty to ensure that every element reflected the solemnity of our task. With each step, I felt the gravity of what we were about to undertake, the village's silent unity echoing the hush of my movements. In the quiet, diligent preparations, my thoughts turned to those who had come before me and those who would follow. We were bound by the rituals that shaped our lives, the ceremonies that marked our days. Tonight, we would stand as one, honoring a life that had ended too soon, but would forever illuminate the hearts of those he had left behind. The delicate fabric of my kimono rustled softly as I moved through the preparations. Each fold, each pleat fell into place with practiced ease, a reflection of years spent perfecting the art of ceremonial dress. My attire was chosen with care, the pattern symbolic of reverence we held for those who had passed. It draped over my form, a weight that was both physical and emotional, anchoring me to the moment. As the sun kissed the horizon, its fading embers set the sky ablaze in a symphony of reds and oranges. The village, bathed in this ethereal glow, had transformed into a place of honor befitting the spirit we gathered to honor and guide. Incense was lit at the shrine's entrance, its smoke spiraling upwards, carrying the scent of sandalwood into the evening air. It was a signal for the villagers to enter, each bearing offerings to honor Katashi. One by one they approached. In their hands they held tokens of remembrance, rice wrapped in bamboo leaves, small boats fashioned from folded paper, and flowers plucked from the hillsides, their petals glistening. Each offering was placed with deliberate care at the altar, creating a mosaic of grief and gratitude, an homage to a man whose service to them was felt as deeply as the ocean's embrace. As the last light of day retreated, relinquishing the sky to the encroaching twilight, I found myself drawn away from the growing congregation. My steps led me to a secluded corner of the shrine garden, where shadows played across the stone path and whispered secrets to the peonies nodding gently in the breeze. In this solitude, my thoughts wandered, inevitably returning to the story that had woven itself into the very fabric of my being. The tale of Katashi honoring his mother. I remembered the respect in his eyes as he spoke of it, the tenderness of his voice as he described the ceremony that we must repeat tonight. Those memories, usually a source of inspiration, now brought a tide of sorrow that threatened to breach the levees of my composure. The sounds of the ceremony became distant, muffled by the veil of my introspection. The incense's fragrance, once a guiding thread through the rituals I had overseen countless times, seemed to fade into the background. In this moment I stood alone, grappling with the heartache of loss and the reverence of remembrance, two forces intertwined like the delicate pattern of kana on the ceremonial cloths. As the darkness settled around me, wrapping the world in a silent embrace, I dwelled in the bittersweet reflection of life that had touched so many. The sorrow that filled my chest was not one to be feared or fought against. It was a testament to the depth of our connection, a reminder that even in mourning there is beauty to be found in the legacy we leave behind. The horizon surrendered to darkness as I gently folded one side of my kimono over the other, secured it at my waist with an obi that bore the crest of the village, a symbol of unity and honor. The fabric, a somber indigo, interspersed with the subtle patterns that told stories only discernible to those versed in their meanings. My hands moved with practiced ease, retying the obi knot with precision. It was time. With measured steps, I made my way toward the altar, the hush of my sandals against the earth barely audible above the whisper of the sea beyond. The lanterns, hung earlier by deft hands, painted pools of soft amber light that guided my path, their gentle glow reflecting off the carefully placed efuda meant to protect and bless. In the center, Haru awaited, his presence a bastion of calm amidst the swell of collective grief. We exchanged a glance, a wordless understanding passing between us as we took our designated places before the altar. Here, surrounded by the intricate panels of cloth adorned with shodo, we were the conduits through which the village would pour its respect and love for a soul that had once walked among us. As the first stars began to pierce the veil of dusk, a quiet settled over the assembled villagers. It was a silence not born of emptiness, but of reverence, an acknowledgement that though one story had ended, it continued to weave itself into the fabric of our lives, unending. The night deepened, and with it the ceremony began. Haru's voice rose in a delicate timbre, carrying the song of mourning and remembrance into the twilight air. The melody was a familiar one, woven through many ceremonies of farewell, but tonight it held the weight of our personal grief. I stood beside him, my role to accompany his plaintive tune with the traditional spoken tribute. Yet as Harrow's sweet lament for Katashi filled the space between us and the gathered onlookers, something within me seized. My hands, so accustomed to the fluid motions of ritual, lay still at my sides. I searched the depth of my memory, where Katashi's story resided like ink on parchment, ready to be voiced and given life once more. But my throat betrayed me, refusing to open, refusing to let the words escape that would honor a man whose actions had touched us all so deeply. The lanterns flickered as if disturbed by a silent breeze, casting dancing shadows over the cloth panels that adorned the shrine. A paralysis took hold, chilling and absolute. My body, usually so poised and controlled, became a statue, unyielding and cold. I thought, tinged with the fear, crept into my mind, whispering of dark yokai spirits that lurked in the shadows, waiting to disrupt the harmony we so painstakingly maintained. Could such entities have breached the perimeter of our sacred Ifuda? Could they sense the vulnerability of a heart struggling to perform its duty? I was plunged into an absence of breath, as though the air itself had been pulled from my lungs by the unseen hand of malice. Panic fluttered into my chest, a moth trapped against a window pane, desperate for escape. I stood rooted in place while Harrow's song continued. Time had come into a hazy concept, each second stretching and compressing until I was adrift in an endless moment, paralyzed. Somewhere in that spinning darkness, Harrow shifted his melody away from the traditional song. Even inside the maelstrom that threatened to swallow me, my years of performing the ceremony noted the change in tradition that was not supposed to be, a nudge against the inertia of the guiding of the spirit. Harrow's voice altered again in cadence and tone, weaving a new narrative into the fabric of the night. Notes rose like tendrils of mist from the sea, wrapping around me, coaxing the petrified silence to listen. Harrow sang of an arrival that had been marked and beginning of a profound bond. Katashi, whose presence had brought a new rhythm to my childhood village, began the focal point of Harrow's song. The day he walked into Sendai, recognizing the potential in my steady hand and focused gaze, he had chosen me as his shodo artist. His decision had been a quiet declaration, one that resonated with promise and mutual respect. The honor of that moment, now captured in the lilting melody, began to thaw the ice that gripped me. As Harrow's voice chronicled the passage of time, the years unfurled before me like the scrolls upon which I had poured my soul. Each brushstroke had been a silent testament to our intertwined lives, the ink a medium through which our mutual admiration flowed. The friendship that Katashi had extended to me, devoid of expectation and rich in understanding, filled the spaces between Harrow's notes. It was a love mirrored in my own heart, a silent companion to my disciplined life. The dam within me crumbled under the weight of the memory and music. There was no yokai extending some dark influence over me. There was only my heart, broken in the tide of grief that threatened to flood over me. In that moment I understood this was not a time for precision and control. Emotion swelled, breaching its confines, and tears escaped the barricade of my lashes. They tracked down my cheeks, warm and unrestrained, a stark contrast to the cool air of the evening. My voice emerged unbidden, a cascade of words that tumbled forth, not in the measured tones of a ceremonial recitation, but with raw, untamed intensity. Each word was a tribute to Katashi, a stream of gratitude and remembrance that flowed without the guidance of my practiced restraint. My narrative took on a life of its own, vibrant and vivid, painting a portrait of the man whom we all had gathered to honor, and as I spoke, I could feel the anchor of tradition melding with the turbulent sea of my emotions. I recounted tales of his many services, each one a journey that bore witness to his compassion. He had guided souls to their rest among their ancestors. He had navigated treacherous ceremonies with an intrinsic grace and empathetic mind to bring understanding to both the living and the dead. He had protected innocence against the dark hands of the yokai. As I spoke, I traced the invisible threads that connected us to him, acknowledging how his actions had fortified the very fabric of each community he had shared his gifts with. In the candlelight that danced against the night, I painted pictures with words, speaking of his humility, how he would deflect praise with his gentle smile. But we knew the truth, that Katashi possessed a rare generosity of spirit that spurred him to act when others would hesitate. Hours passed, and the mosaic of his life unfolded, a rich panorama of selflessness. His honor was not a loud proclamation, but a quiet certainty that guided with each and every deed. It resonated in the respectful silence of our onlookers, in the shared glances that spoke volumes of their collective admiration. Haru sang and I spoke, the life of Katashi recounted in a way that I could have never imagined. The lanterns burned lower, casting shadows that flickered across the ceremonial space. Yet within me there was a light that grew brighter, and with each recounted memory, deep within my heart I knew that our departure from tradition was right. There was a true measure of our service, not just in the precision of rituals, but in the heartfelt observance of a soul who had himself chosen a non-traditional path. The cadence of waves overlapped at the shores of the village, a counterpoint that wrapped around my words like silk. The lanterns flickered in the faces of those gathered, reflecting the fading light and the depth of their new understanding of who Katashi had been. We ended in harmony, Haru and I entwined in the solemn duty of remembrance. Our energies, intertwined with the night, had honored our leader with such a story shared, each note sung. Tears glistened on our cheeks, unashamed in their descent, for they were tears born of love and respect. We had poured all of ourselves into the ceremony, an offering to the memory of a man who had given so much of himself. At last, the waves were the only sound to be heard as a collective silence enveloped the shrine. It was a silence profound and potent, our voices now emptied of their stories, but with a sense of completion, of purpose fulfilled. My body felt the weight of exertion, but we had done what honor demanded. We had honored Katashi until the last story had been told. Beneath the stars that watched over us, it was evident that we and the people of this small fishing village had united in a moment of pure homage. Our collective mourning had transformed into something transcendent, a shared experience that would be etched in the annals of our history, a beautiful moment that defined the heart of the village. It was the most beautiful ceremony I would ever see.